Okay, guys. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Anna and Stas and all the volunteers and sponsors of SVOD for putting on such a great conference again. They really deserve a big round of applause. But thank you, yeah. By way of introduction, my name is Leo Grayver. I'm a longtime sponsor of SVOD. I'm a partner at a boutique law firm with a very long name. I'm not even going to say it. We have offices in California and an affiliate office in Moscow. We represent startups and venture capital funds. What makes me want to get up in the morning is the chance to get to work with brilliant young startups, many of whom are here in the audience, and really amazing entrepreneurs and investors, such as the four gentlemen that are sitting to the left of me. So without further ado, let me introduce our illustrious panel. The title of the panel is Building Bridges Across Seas and Continents. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I think it has something to do with building global companies. And as you'll soon find out, all the four people here, all the four speakers, really exemplify that idea. So let me introduce, starting from the left. Sitting in a purple shirt is Nathan Lowe. Nathan is a founder of Zion Tech Angels, which is an Israeli-based fund. Over his 20-plus career, he has invested in over 100 startups, delivering an absolutely miraculous IRR of over 40%. Just incredible. Next to him is Roman Simonov. Roman is the managing director at Russia Partners, which is a subsidiary of Siguler Guff. And Roman is in charge of the technology fund of Russia Partners. Russia Partners is probably one of the largest and certainly I think the oldest private equity and venture fund in Russia. And prior to that, he was famous for bringing Intel Capital to Russia by launching its office in Moscow. Next to him, with probably the best hair on the panel, is Dusan Stojanovic. All I really need to tell about him is that in addition to speaking 6 languages, he was awarded the Angel Investor of the Year by the European Angel Association. Pretty incredible. And our moderator is Geoffrey Baehr, who is the managing director at Almaz, which is one of the most prominent Russia-oriented funds, although Geoffrey works out of their office in Menlo Park. So with that, I will leave the podium and I'll let Geoffrey begin.
Thank you. So I think it would be a good idea for each one of us to define what we think a bridge model is, so that we're hopefully talking on the same page. And let me go first, not because I want to give a commercial, I'll just tell you what we do. And the idea that we founded our fund around was to have operations in Moscow, in Ukraine, in the region, find good engineers and teams to build technology which was applicable to the Russian, CIS, Ukraine market, and build the companies out there. But also, if the engineering and founding team had aspirations to build a global company for the global market, we would probably bring the operations, marketing, sales, and management here and set it up here. Maybe the subtitle for that would be that it's easier to hire a world-class VP of marketing here than it is there, with no disrespect intended. So that is our definition of bridge. And what we see ourselves as doing is not being VCs as much as being good program managers who allow the companies and enforce good communication across 11-hour time zones, good transfer of technology, and cooperation among many different teams. So I'll stop with our definition and ask you what you think a bridge model is.
It's not that different from your definition. Given that we actually invest only in tech, our definition is that we try to have the tech team in the place where we have the best engineers for that particular business. Having said that, we truly believe that it has, one of the founders or key people that are on the cap table have to be where the tech team is. And where our sales and marketing people are where the largest markets are. So that's basically the distinction. We have the tech team where the talent is, co-founded there, markets where the other co-founders are in terms of the largest market opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So our definition is very similar to yours with slight nuances. So development team has to be on the ground in former Soviet Union. That basically a definition was also imposed on us by a few LPs that invest in the fund. These LPs have development mission, so we have to follow our agreement with them. And that can manifest itself in two different business models. So it could be a company out of a region which is former Soviet Union. It doesn't have to be Russia. We've seen companies out of Estonia, out of Ukraine, going globally, not necessarily to US. And it could be a company is here, started by a former immigrant or not immigrant, and has development team in the region. And if it's majority of value creation happens in the region, that's the target for us as well. So we can invest in class A or in class B. And hopefully two of them look the same before the IPO or M&A, but it's a long way there. And it's not always between Russia and US. We've seen companies like Viber, developers in Belarus and headquarters in Israel. So we do those deals as well, and we're pretty much looking for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we don't have a fund. We have a platform invested in 60 companies in Israel, 40 companies here in California, 9 companies not in California, not in Israel. And over the last 5 or 10 years, 300 multinational corporations have set up their research facilities in Israel. The biggest of which, the original one of which was Intel, then came IBM and Motorola, and all your favorite cell phones and other things have been designed over there. The technologies that come out of the Army are amazing. And it used to be that you used to have to move the company here to Silicon Valley to find the world-class VP of everything. What we found now, over the last 3 or 4 years, is the way to bridge the gaps and bridge the oceans is to go somewhere in Tel Aviv. eBay has an office there, and Facebook has an office there, and Apple has an office there, and they actually have biz dev people there. And these companies who have been started for less than $1 million already have a product, they're already selling, there's a tremendous shortage of capital, which is why we're bringing 11 of them here 2 weeks from tonight to Fenwick and West. Anyone who wants an invitation, come see me afterwards. We have 150 angels coming to see the 11 companies on the 25th. And the idea is that we can help these companies become international companies by doing strategic distribution deals with world-class companies that already have the distribution. There's no reason to reinvent the distribution wheel. We would love to take whomever's distribution system and to take our finished product, white label it, whatever it is, and push it through. We actually Ziontech manage the IBM IBM's only high-tech accelerator in the world in Petah Tikva. It's on the main floor of the main IBM building. IBM has 1,100 PhDs and 1,100 salespeople in Israel. It's an enormous research center. We also have Checkpoint, we have Microsoft and whatnot who are busy looking at the technologies that we are finding, figuring out how they can sell it through their networks. And so we are bridging the oceans by finding the biz dev people for the world corporations in Israel who are there specifically to find great Israeli technologies and to bring them through their distribution systems worldwide.
Thank you. I think one of the things that has become an impediment, at least for us, is the fact that we apply rules. When we invest in people, we're investing in the team. We're investing in you guys. And we're investing in the idea that you have. And we're investing in the dream that you have. And we come along to help them realize that. Fine. That's what we do. But the problem is we have to prove to ourselves that 10 other guys are not doing that, that the intellectual property is yours, is correct. And so what we do is a process of due diligence, and we examine the intellectual property, but we also examine the financial structure, we examine the organization, the governance, all of the aspects of how the company or the startup is organized. And one of the things that we've found to be exceedingly difficult is when there is a mismatch of what is very simply, maybe it's accounting rules in Ukraine are different from US accounting rules. They're not better or worse, they're just different. That the structure of how a company is organized, who has the ownership, all of these things are very different from region to region. So how do we solve that problem? It slows us down a lot, and we spend a lot of time trying to normalize and create a structure where we can justify to ourselves, yeah, it's okay. So it's very difficult, and we don't have the solution. I'm wondering if you guys see a similar problem, and how do you say it's okay?
Yeah, I would love to have a solution on that one, then I would have got the Nobel Prize immediately.
I was going to copy his answer. Yeah.
But I would say the earlier it's done, the better. So I think we are investing a little bit earlier than you guys, so we're basically seed angel investor, right?
Yeah.
So basically the most painful thing I did was actually moving a company from Paris to New York. Because it had already accounting principles from French GAAP and then moving to US GAAP, and the legal fees and the accounting fees has been very expensive doing that. Now, given that background, we really prefer to have a US structure no matter where actually the original team might be, and actually do it rather earlier than later. So I guess my answer to that would be we try to do it rather earlier than later. So although we might not it's low cost at the beginning, it becomes a higher cost later on. So that's the only value add I can give on that topic.
Okay, Roma?
Yeah, we usually restructure companies when we invest. It's never Russian company, right? It's always Netherlands, Luxembourg, even Cyprus, and you tend to think from the exit: is that company going to be acquired or IPO'd? If it's acquired, what is the best structure for the acquirer, down the road, to have IP there, okay, employment's here, and management there. So we kind of thinking, from the exit. It takes time, takes money to structure all of this, different jurisdictions and shareholders agreement, and then a fun part begins. How money flowing, from the company you invest to the operating company on the ground, how you do, deal with all this transfer pricing, accounting rules, of course, different. Not just, French GAAP to US GAAP. It can be GAAP to IFRS or just, management accounts with totally different recognition schemes and transparency issues. And you solve all of that at the time you invest, and you basically overspend on lawyers, on accountants, on due diligence, and takes longer. And then after you invest, it's also difficult. I'll give you an example. One of our tier one, London-based global fund negotiated a CEO agreement with our new CEO, of our portfolio company. Basically, typical, Western agreement. Job offer, with all the, comps and benefits, and just passed this to us. And to implement in the Russian environment, it basically took us another month, because here employment at will, over there employment agreement, right? You cannot have an agreement like non-competes, non-solicitation, so you have to change that. Different. Statutory requirements imposed on you by the labor code. If CEO, it's called general director. It has special signature authority with the tax authorities, and you have to change that. And in order to do that, it requires us to change bylaws. If you change bylaws of Russian company, you have to synchronize, all the articles, to the holding company. So simple employment agreement to CEO, took 1 month and $50,000.
Well, just 1 second, Nathan. I think what the message for the audience is that expectations are not exactly the same as the actual reality of how long it takes to do these deals. We all get them done, but because of the additional complexity due to the international impedance mismatch, if you will, between laws, accounting, IP rules, et cetera, it takes a lot longer and a lot more money to get these done. I think that's the high order message. And with that, I'll give you back the floor.
So with respect to Israel or America, we're indifferent as to where the companies are headquartered. I'd like to make a slightly different comment to the entrepreneurs in the room. If you're starting a new company and all your business is going to be here and in Western Europe, then please locate your company here. If your company is going to be mostly overseas and you're going to do a tremendous amount of business in Asia as the world pivots to Asia, where the growth is, where the lower classes are becoming the middle classes, think about hosting or domiciling your company in a tax-efficient location and having a U.S. subsidiary. So you can pay your employees here according to what you're doing here, but you can hold the IP overseas, you can generate your revenue overseas, and so you're not shopping for a tax jurisdiction after you're making money and spending hundreds of millions of dollars re-domiciling. You're just starting out that way. So if you're a new entrepreneur and you're going to do most of your business overseas, headquarter yourself overseas and create a U.S. sub.
I agree with you completely. And that actually leads into a larger discussion, which is, so what are the outcomes? I mean, we've found, and by no means are we the experts, we just do this every day and we try to learn a little bit. We found that if you tailor your company when you start it, when you tailor your company to be sold to Cisco, and this division of Cisco, A, it never happens, and B, no one else is now interested because you have something that's unique for only one outcome. So we prefer to say outcomes happen as they happen, and many times they're by luck. But the question is, so what is the outcome for a bridge company? Say the company is successful and they're domiciled in Singapore or they're domiciled in the UK. Is it flotation on an alternative market? Is it purchased by an international purchaser? We're not sure. So what we have done in talking to entrepreneurs such as yourselves is to say, don't tailor the company. You can't know the outcome. Just do good work, sell like crazy, grow like mad, the rest will happen. Mm-hmm. Now that's kind of that's like motherhood. Yeah, it's great. It was easy to say that. Of course, it's really hard to do. But the outcomes we have seen have largely occurred outside of Russia and have occurred in the traditional London, Hong Kong, New York markets. So I'd like to hear your opinions on, is there going to be any change here in what happens with outcomes? Is it going to be purchasing by the large Asian electronic companies? Who's going to take these companies out?
Like more of a vision point of view. Yeah, I'm attending quite often a conference called the Global 1000 here in the US, which is every 6 months on the West Coast, every 6 months on the East Coast. And I really believe that the next Global 1000 will be Asia. So that's actually one of the reasons why I'm moving from Stockholm to Singapore. And I believe that the Asian companies will become very, very acquisitive in the next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I mean, I'm taking a personal bet on that, from that point of view.
In Russia, we see now big influx of Asian money due to political events and some switch to the east. Obviously, but we've done IPO, a technology IPO in New York actually 2 years ago. Our portfolio company called EBAN Systems, mostly from Belarus, but developers are in Ukraine and in Russia. 11,000 of those, and they provided first outsourcing services for global, software companies, SAP, banks, and grew very nicely, and became like developer, and to the point that we floated in 2012 in New York, which was basically first IPO, company out of Belarus in US, according to all these, strict rules. And it was quite successful, during the time when, Pandora and Groupon and Zynga and even Facebook, after IPO, a little bit collapsed. So they exactly did, as you said, just execute, set good expectations, and then exceed it, and then do it constantly, and was one of good performing IPO, over the last, for 2 years, stock quadrupled. And yes, exit is IPO, but we cannot exit at IPO, right? We usually take large stakes. In this case, we had, more than 50% of the company. So for us was, very important, not the IPO itself, but actually how company will perform after IPO, so we can sell along the way. And it worked out pretty well.
The IPO is only one step in the journey. So,
of the 20 exits I've had over 21 years, 5 of them were IPO, one of which was on the Neue Markt that doesn't really exist anymore, and 4 of them were on NASDAQ, and 15 were strategic sales. All of you have commented about Asia being the future. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Tel Aviv. Of the 4,000 attendees at MIXI, fully 400 were from the People's Republic of China, and they are there to buy companies. They're there to partner with companies, but they're there to buy companies. And in the last few months, they bought the largest dairy in Israel. They're not moving the cows to Israel. They're going to take the technology, and they're going to apply it to all of the dairy farms that they have in China. They bought the largest chemical company in Israel. They're not going to move the chemicals. They're going to move the business processes and copy them, sort of buying business processes, if you will. And we are seeing no end of delegations from China to Israel, especially as China starts to get upset with the United States about different security matters. And so there is a extraordinary, and China's the largest single investor in both Israeli funds and in private placements of Israeli high-tech companies in the last year. And that number is only growing, and as wealthy Chinese, there were 30 or 40 family offices from China that had come to this MIXI conference specifically to invest in Israeli companies. So China has decided that they're going to reinvent their processes. But take a company like General Motors. You have the CIO, the Chief Information Officer of General Motors, is in Herzliya Pituach every single month. I guess there are more engineers that are going to help GM just north of Tel Aviv than there are in Detroit. And if you just think about it, 20 years ago, GM wouldn't have been caught dead leaving the United States looking for technology. And now they're there every month to get whatever they can, driverless cars, telematics, whatever it is that they want for their cars. They're going to, the path to GM's revival is through Herzliya.
Interesting. Well, so what we're hearing here is go where the customers are. Take the technology that's applicable to the global market and go where the customers need it. But I think what we're also hearing here is that the teams, the companies that are adaptable and if necessary can perform a pivot or can produce a product that is globally applicable have a materially larger chance of being successful. So one of the questions that my folks and I ask all the time is, so if you as a company, be you Russian, Ukraine, US, doesn't matter, when you decide that you're going to set your operations to address a major development facility or operational base in another country where you don't know the language and you don't know the culture and you don't know the business practices and you don't know the legal structure, this is not getting back into a bureaucratic question. How do you ensure success? And I would say that one of the VC community, at least in the US, over the decade of the 1990s, mid-1990s to 2000s, made a very concerted effort to move into India, made a very concerted effort to move into Israel, actually much earlier in Israel, and made a very concerted effort to move into India. And in my opinion, the people who failed were the guys who are not able to get a local team of native people who spoke the language, had the connections, and were willing to be motivated. And this was the critical fact. The motivation was different in those countries for what made those guys want to make the foreign company succeed. It was different. It was cash? No, maybe it was not cash. Was it social status? Great, I'm working for IBM. Fantastic. Was it, I'm going to get stock? It was different in each case. So that was a very rude, a very difficult education for US VCs. I'm wondering what you guys think in terms of, if indeed we're urging this pivot into China, into Vietnam, into Indonesia, into all of these fast, high growth societies, what are you guys going to have to think about to be able not to fall on your face with us falling on top of you? Thank you. So we need to have some way of thinking about what are the keys to making a foreign operation to yourselves successful.
Yeah. So on that one, you know, I've been in the angel investor, whatever, from 2004 to today, so it's about 10 years. So in 2010, I really said, you know, how do we crack this issue? And I'm still not sure that we cracked it completely, but the way we take really an HR human approach on it. Basically, all my partners, we are all angel investors investing together, are based in 8 cities. So it's here in the Valley, it's in New York, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, Beijing, and Singapore. So that's only the cities where we are based locally. And then when it comes to the founding team, the company we invest in, it's the same formula. If we are doing whatever, Paris, New York, one founder has to be in each side of the Atlantic. If we're doing Beijing, Silicon Valley, one founder has to be on each side of the Atlantic. When I say founder, a local person actually. So it needs to be, in our case, somebody actually coming from that city. And I would even say city and not country. Because we are even early, we are very early. So it's kind of going into depth on the ecosystem. So who is this guy in New York, or who is this guy in Beijing or in Singapore who understands the ecosystem from a founder's point of view all the way down in depth. And then in parallel to that, we have the angels, that us, the investors, understanding the ecosystem in parallel to that as well. So that's how we try to address it. It has worked in 2-3 cases, but we still have to prove this in the long run.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can actually help you to set up office there and get localized. That's not that difficult if you have a good partner on the ground, and we've done it a few times. What's important is to hire good local talent and retain them. And you have to think about, it's not like going to Russia, Ukraine, or Moscow. Big variance between Moscow and the other city in terms of cost, in terms of culture, in terms of retention rates of these people. And what motivates them, I give you example. When I was acquiring team of 650 supercomputer engineers into Intel in 2004, half of the negotiation was not about the price. Half of the negotiation was what projects they're going to work on once they become part of Intel. Right? They didn't want to work on chipset. Right? They wanted to work on a next generation chip to prove that they can do the best and win the world. And until that was ironed out, they couldn't agree to the deal, actually. So, that motivates, good engineers. And if the company is global, obviously, chances are that, this company competes on a global scale and will push innovation forward. So it's more interesting than to work for outsourcing company or for domestic play. So that's the advantage.
Thank you, Nathan.
Geoff, to break the discussion in 2 halves, in terms of companies' formation, I think it's imperative, sitting here in Silicon Valley, that the companies are formed in those cities and countries and cultures that tolerate failure, that celebrate failure, that learn from failure. So Silicon Valley is certainly a place that you can fail once, 2, 3 times, just get up and do it again. You learn from failure. If you're not falling, you're not skiing hard enough. Israel certainly tolerates it. There's a very, very flat model in the army, which is what everybody goes through. And you have to make your own decision. If it's not a good decision, make a different decision. But you're the only, there's no one to call. You just have to do it. I'm not sure that Asia yet is that tolerant of failure. And I'm not sure that I would start companies in Asia because their culture is one of consensus and no one losing face. And to fail is to lose face. The other half of your question, Jeff, though, in terms of once you have your great little company here in Silicon Valley or in Russia, there's absolutely every reason in the world to market into Asia, because that's where the consumers are, that's where the spendable dollars are, and to the extent that you can find big companies with established distribution, take your great little product that you created in Russia or Ukraine or wherever and sell it through those great big companies in Asia that have all the developed logistical systems and supply systems, and maximize your profits. That's the execution that you spoke about. So I wouldn't start a company in Asia, but I would certainly sell every widget I had or every software I had in Asia.
Well, I would say that in terms of failure mode, you're looking at the guy who said no to Skype as opposed to yes. Thank you. And so you have to know as a VC also when to say, hey, I was an idiot. But to learn from that. So let me ask a question about failure, which is there's cultural failure and the approval for that. There's the ability to say, you know what, I messed up. And that exists in differing levels in different portions of the world. But generally, let's get back to the bridge model. Where I've seen it fail is in communication, in the assignment of a cultural bias from one side to the other. We're going to send all the testing over there because it's cheap. Well, you just heard, no engineer in his right mind wants to write test suites, and ever, right? Maybe the other thing that happens is those guys from the US are calling and telling us what to do, but we're the guys who founded the company. Those guys are morons. I'm not going to talk to them anymore. So there are many failure modes that are centered, to me and our team, who we do this all day, it's centered around communication, respect, integrity, and also the understanding that people want to work on something that they value themselves. And when any of those is not addressed in a respectful way, it's a huge problem, and it's really hard to put it back together again. So maybe you guys want to talk about what are the failure modes that you see for these bridged companies that are operating in different spots, irregardless of where they are, and how can you mitigate them?
I think it's a little bit to the point Roman mentioned a little bit earlier, that in those kind of 2004 to 2010, the first 6 years, when a couple of failures that we did, was when we did this distribution of engineers. We used them mainly for, let's say, productivity, cost, low cost. And we didn't really bring them into the company culture and also bringing them in on the cap table to actually, so that they really feel that they are founders and part of it. So that's what we have changed, actually, based on some specific failure that I remember was in Ulaanbaatar. There were great engineers, really great people, and we couldn't keep them, so we lost them. So that would be specifically one thing that I remember from a failure point of view. In terms of, I was very impressed earlier today when I heard that this really worked between Moscow and Silicon Valley, especially in terms of the time zones. So I tend to say when there is a big time zones difference that it's more difficult because there is so little overlap in the morning and the evening, and it makes people get up extremely early and go to bed extremely late. But I don't think that's actually the issue. The issue is actually to get really the people as a whole team. And I would say the more you spend of time up front with these key people in the different locations up front together as a founding team, and that they do actually meet regularly physically, especially in the beginning, I think it's critical. And we didn't do that. I didn't do that between 2004 and 2010, or I didn't push the founders to do it.
Yeah, failure starts when you start bringing, Western CEO to the foreign company. That's really tricky. So, and we saw a lot of failures, around that. To mitigate that, and I noticed some successful companies, and some of them actually became seriously successful companies in these bridge models, are usually when there are two co-founders, and one co-founder lives here, and another co-founder lives there. And one is good, manager, CEO, and another one is good head of R&D, visionary guy. And they communicate constantly, and they've done it together, and they always 50-50 in every venture they do. So there is like brothers. And then if you see that happening, that's kind of, for me, like mark. That risk may be, maybe lower in this in this situation.
Thank you. Nathan,
Everything that the other speakers have said, I totally agree with. The cross-border transitions that we've seen that have worked are when the two founders trusted themselves implicitly, each other implicitly. And in both cases, the CTO was sent to America, and the business remained overseas. And the CTO came here to, in one case New York, one case Silicon Valley, to really get into the midst of the ecosystem of the tech scene, and it benefited both companies. But in general, having a company in two places is just one more thing that can go wrong, and it's hard enough to make it go right. And if you have a 10% batting average, you know, you're doing really well. We don't encourage it, but the two companies that did it well. But it's just one more challenge.
Thank you. What I would like to do is have each one of us say the one or two messages that we'd like to deliver to you guys to take away, and or to understand about how we work. And then after we each do that, then we'll open it up for questions. So being the moderator, I get to go first all the time. So I'm not right, I'm just first. So there are two things that always strike us that you guys don't do. You need to do your due diligence on us. Just because we have a checkbook doesn't mean that we're good guys. We can be idiots. Do you know how many companies come to us and say, I want to talk to other companies in your portfolio? 0. Do you know how many companies come to us and say, so what do you really do to help the companies? Other than tell us in the beginning, you're going to help us recruit the CEO of General Motors. None. 0. So you're going to be friends with us for 7 years. So you better do due diligence on us as well as we do on you, because it's going to make both parties a lot happier, especially if we're in these disparate locations. Because we got to like each other and work together and believe in the same thing, because we have the same motivation. And the second thing for us, and I think you guys should know this. You know what a VC does over their career? They make a grand total of about 15 decisions. That's it. That's your whole career. So if you want to be known as a really good VC, use extreme good taste and make about 15 to 20 decisions that you utilize that taste to be able to put all of your energy in. Don't do 500. So this is something that I want all of you folks to know, which is a lot of times VCs will look like they're, you know, going forever and making a decision. The answer is we need exquisite good taste. So you need to help us get there. If you can tell us more strongly why you guys are good and why you're going to help us make one of those 15 to 20 good decisions over my entire career, you're a friend. That's my messages.
Yeah, I think my two messages would be all this kind of legal, tax, accounting, cross-border stuff. Don't do that. Let the investors do as much as possible of that. Because if you do that, you're going to fail.
Right.
Big time. The second thing would be, and I'm repeating myself the third time, I think, is if you really want to become global and you want to do this kind of global thing with, you know, distributed teams, whatever, make sure that you do have the complete team yourself. It's very difficult for an investor to say, you need to find a co-founder, this is a guy I know. It needs to be, if you want to, you know, play soccer and win in Brazil, you need to get to know each other really well. And make sure that that team is, you know, diversified in terms of geography, but also, if it's possible, in terms of men, women. You got to have all these ingredients to build a global team. That would be my second.
Thank you. Well,
my advice will be on a personal level. If you to build global company, you know, successful, it can be done. It was done, right? If they can do it, you can do it. But just imagine, you will be traveling a lot, not going with your wife on Fridays, you know, not seeing your kids, having these phone calls, conference calls, you know, during holiday here but not holiday there, or on Friday night, you know, when it's morning there, and really get your family support before you do it, because we've seen so many divorces, second marriages, another divorce, and usually when company is not successful, you know, then divorce happen, and you really don't need that. So really get your family buy-in, before you commit to that journey, and then the rest will be easier.
Thank you. Nathan.
So to the entrepreneurs, 2 messages. One, don't be afraid of selling your company after 2 or 3 years. You're going to have other great ideas. Once you have the capital from having sold the first company, it'll be much easier for you to come up with an idea and fund it yourself for the second company. So you don't have to build the world's biggest company. Don't be afraid of selling it. And the second message is one that I fundamentally believe, and I've seen it to be true in the 120 companies we funded and the 1,000 companies we haven't funded, and that is dilution does not matter. If your company is going to be worth $1 billion or $5 billion, it doesn't matter what percentage of the company you own, you will have more money than you can possibly spend in your lifetime. If your company is going to be worth 0 because it's bankrupt, which 80% of the companies or 90% of the companies will be, dilution also does not matter. If your company's only going to be worth $10 or $20 million, then whether you have 10% or you have 30% does matter. But there isn't a single entrepreneur in this room today, or one who starts a company, who actually feels that his or her company is only going to be worth $10 or $20 million 5 years from today. So therefore, pick the best VC you can find, pick the best angels you can find, share the equity with everybody who gives you money, share the equity with all of your service providers, share the equity with all of your employees. The dilution absolutely does not matter unless you are only modestly successful, in which case, don't start the company.
Thank you. So with that, we have about 5 minutes or so to take some questions. And what I'd like to do is open the floor up to people who have questions. And the only rule we have is don't throw anything at us. So, anybody have any questions about kind of where we're coming from philosophically, what we see as the future? I circulated these questions to the group to kind of think about this deeply before the session. And so if there's something that you feel that needs to be addressed, by all means. So with that, anyone? One person in the orange. Just a second. So, and when you get the question, would you tell us who you address it to or the entire group?
Thank you for the interesting panel, actually. Actually, this is addressed to all of you because you know best. So, actually, you have thought of difference in culture in different countries, okay? Just I want to know, actually, if you cannot motivate employees by giving out stock options in some particular countries, okay? What can be done for motivating the team to go forward, actually? Thank you.
Anyone want to take it? I can give it a shot?
Yep.
Okay. So it comes down to, it's not immediately obvious. It comes down to immediate versus delayed reward. And if the delayed reward is recognition, well, then maybe you get a method patent on something and the entire world knows that you're a really smart person. That's one thing. Is it intellectual property ownership, patents that you can license out or derivatives? Is it licensing of software that you write? Is it the ability to be in contact with a team of people who in the next job, they're superstars, and they put you in contact with the absolute best people on the planet? So the answer for me is it's not intuitively obvious. Money immediately is not always the solution. It's not always the attractant.
Yeah, I would say, especially for the engineering talent, which is kind of the major concern we have, it would be to keep them really working on the really coolest stuff you can imagine all the time. As soon as something new cool comes up, they need to be in the loop. That motivates a lot on the engineering talent. Obviously, that might not be that productive in the short term, but in the long term, you retain them, actually. So always, what is this newest stuff? What do you think about that? Do you want to give me your ideas, your input on that?
Any other? No?
And actually give them the options. It's a good system. Why not?
Okay. Okay, one more question.
Quick question. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts. It's interesting that you mentioned various workable scenarios where founders are across different cities, continents. One of the signals I'm getting from other investors is that it's actually beneficial to have co-founders actually in one location to facilitate clearly operation. What's your take on it? Do you think we're gonna diminish our chances of finding it in this scenario, or not? And how? Thank you.
I didn't get the question.
I didn't get the question.
We didn't quite. There was a little difficulty with the sound system. Did you say that you and your other founder were in different locations? I apologize for that.
We're getting signals that it's more difficult to find funding if your co-founders are separated.
Funding.
Yeah.
Sorry, was the word funding I missed.
We apologize.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is, if they are separated, it is one more thing to say no to, for sure. I would say, like the example we had earlier, why did Skype buy, the team we saw last time? One thing was the product fit, and all that. But one thing, indirectly was Skype had already, started their own company in Estonia, Stockholm, and a couple of other cities. So it's all about if you can recognize, that VC that has had some, really successes in founders being in two teams. So, the Prezi guys, when they went to Silicon Valley, they are in Hungary, now they're here. Who invested in them? Well, go to them. Look at, who are the VCs who have had successes.
And then not just VC, exact partner in that VC who did it. It really matters.
Good point, Roman. Okay, well, with that, I'd like to say thank you all for listening to us. I hope it was enjoyable for you. We appreciate it.